Welcome to day 6 of 40 seconds for 40 days. Apologize for missing a few days, was a little bit under the weather, but we're back on track. I want to share with you a Gemara in Bava Basra. The Gemara tells a story about what happened after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a Brisa, K'shacharav habayis b'shniya, when the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, you can imagine the depression that must have fallen among the nation. It was one thing when the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. They never thought it could happen, but then the unimaginable happened. And then not too long after that, the second Beis HaMikdash ends up being destroyed a few hundred years later. Rabu Prushin b'Yisrael shelo le'echol basar v'shelo l'shtos yayin. Many people stood up and said, you know what, we can't eat meat or we can't drink wine because we're so depressed. Nitzpal lehen Rabbi Yehoshua. So Rabbi Yehoshua, he didn't understand this. Amar lehen, he said to them, Banai, my children, mipnei ma'i atem ochlin basar ve'in atem shosin yayin. Why aren't you eating meat and why aren't you drinking wine? Amrulo, they said to him, Nochal basar, we can't eat meat because shemimenu makrivin al gabe hamizbech v'achshav batel. We eat meat and we think of the sacrifices that were brought in the Beis HaMikdash, and now we don't bring them anymore. How could we eat meat? Nishtei yayin, we're going to drink wine? Sheminaschen al gabe hamizbech, that used to be poured on the altar for libations. V'achshav batel, but now it's not being done anymore. But Rabbi Yehoshua still didn't understand. Amar lahem, he said to them, Im kain lechem lo nochal, then you can't eat bread either. Shekvar batlu menachos, because there were sacrifices, the mincha offering that was brought from flour. Efshar beperos, can you eat fruit? Peros lo nochal, you can't eat fruit because shekvar batlu bikurim, because the first fruit sacrifice that was to be brought every single year no longer can be brought. Efshar beperos achirim, maybe you could eat other fruit, they suggested, but then mayim lo nishteh, you can't drink water. Shekavar batal nisacham mayim, because the water libation will no longer be happening anymore. And at this point, shasku, at this point they were silent, they had nothing to say. Essentially what Rabbi Yehoshua was saying to them was that if you mourn to such an extent, there will come a point that if you are going to at least be consistent with your mourning practices, that you will no longer be able to do this because you won't be able to live. So Amar lahen, he said to them, Banai, my children, Bo'u va'omar lachem, come and I'll tell you what to do. Shelo lehitabel kol ikar yafshar, you can't mourn entirely. Shekvar nigzera gzeira, because at the end of the day, what was to have happened has already happened. Ulehitabel yoter midai yafshar, and to mourn to such an extent is impossible. She'in gozrin gezera ala tzibor el imkin rovat tzibor yicholim la'amod ba, because you can't establish a decree on the entire congregation if the congregation cannot uphold it, if most of them can't uphold it, and most people can't stop eating meat, can't stop drinking wine, can't stop eating bread, can't stop drinking water. These are basic tenets of how we live our life, to eat these fundamental foods. We can't not eat them. Even if you want to stop yourself from having some of the luxuries in the world, these are basics at the end of the day. And so therefore, says Rabbi Yehoshua and the Chachamim, they decreed a series of things that we can do in order to remind ourselves of the destruction and to continue to rebuild and to move forward. And that's the part that I think we need to focus on. Because in the wake of terrible things that our nation faces, we understand that there's always this need to keep going. No matter what, we have to pick ourselves up and keep moving forward. Over the last week or so, we've all been so broken by some of the events that have taken place for our nation, specifically the hostage return that happened last week of the 6 bodies that were murdered by Hamas, but so much more that has, and likely, if we're being honest, will continue to happen as well, that could be disturbing and devastating for us. We hope and pray, of course, that it doesn't happen, but we understand that sometimes we are not able to control these things. And so what do we do? How do we move forward? How do we set aside for ourselves certain elements of our world, of our lives, that we can use to begin to rebuild in the same way that the rabbis instructed the nation to begin to rebuild after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash? And I think that the answer might be that we have to focus on some of the simple things in our lives that are genuine miracles. Over the next few days, what I'd like to do with you is I'd like to specifically look at the human body, and specifically look at it through the prism of Asher Yatzar, the blessing that we recite after we use the bathroom, certain basic elements of our lives, the human body that we take so for granted. If we can focus on some of the miracles that take place in our bodies on a daily basis and recognize what it means that we have Hashem in our lives constantly and consistently, even when it comes to something as mundane as using the bathroom, that could be a way to move forward, to rebuild, to focus on what we do have, the blessings that Hashem does bring to our lives, and how we can then begin to rebuild. I hope you will join me on this journey over the next few days and wish everyone a beautiful day.